The wind howled like a mourning widow across the empty plains. Snow fell thick and fast, blanketing the land in silence, smothering even the memory of warmth. Somewhere between the edge of her former town and the tree line of the wild, Clara. May stumbled forward, clutching her swollen belly, breath fogging in shallow bursts. Her boots were soaked through, her bonnet long gone, and each step sent lightning through her spine. The child was coming, and it didn't care that she was. A lone doubt her breath hitched as another contraction gripped her, sharper than the last. She fell to her knees, crying out into the blizzard, her voice lost in the wind. Snow clung to her lashes, her skirts, her very skin. She didn't know where she was anymore. All she knew was that the people of Fairwood Hollow, the town she'd called home since she was a child, had turned their backs on her the moment they'd seen her belly swell. God-fearing folk, they called themselves. But when Clara's fiancé died in a mining collapse and she refused to marry the preacher's widowed brother out of shame, judgment came fast. Her refusal branded her not just unwed, but sinful, a scarlet letter on her soul. They said she should pray for mercy. Instead, they packed her a crust of bread, a flask of water, and sent her into the snow like garbage. She crawled, now one hand gripping a fallen branch, the other bracing her belly. The pain came again, blinding and deep. She screamed, falling sideways into a drift. The baby was coming whether she lived or died. Beneath a cluster of gnarled pines, Clara found a small dip in the earth, half sheltered by rock and snow. It was barely a hollow, but it was enough. Shaking, she peeled off her outer shawl and spread it beneath her. Her hands were numb, but she had to keep moving. She knew the risks: no help, no midwife, no fire. She was 19 and about to die. In the dirt, bringing a life into a world that didn't want either of them. The hours blurred. She screamed. She bled. She wept. But she did not give up, and then suddenly there he was, a small, squalling baby boy. His cry was weak, but it was there. Clara held him to her chest, skin to skin, heart to heart, and for the first time since being cast out, she smiled. Her lips were cracked. Her fingers blue. But she was not broken. She tore off the inner layer of her dress, wrapping him as tightly as she could. She whispered a name. Daniel. After his father. Then something shifted in the trees. She wasn't alone. From the shadows stepped a tall figure. On horseback, dark against the snow. A blanket of red and black wool draped across broad shoulders. His long black hair was tied in a warrior's braid, and his face, painted in quiet reverence, bore no expression. But his eyes locked on hers, and in that moment, Clara felt no fear. The man dismounted slowly, silently. He came forward on foot, pausing only when he was a few feet away. Clara tried to speak, but her throat was dry. She shifted protectively. Over her baby, shielding him. The man crouched, his gaze falling to the infant. The wind roared between them, but he didn't flinch. And then he did something Clara never expected. He removed the heavy Comanche cloak from his shoulders and wrapped it around both mother and child. Not a word passed his lips, no explanation, only a gesture of quiet mercy. Clara trembled not just from the cold, but from the unexpected kindness. Her lips quivered. Why? Why would you help me? The man looked at her, his voice low and calm, because no one else did. He lifted her gently in his arms, baby and all. Clara felt herself fading, but her last thought before the darkness took her was not of her shame or fear. It was that for the first time in weeks, someone had looked at her and seen a woman worth saving, and beneath the protection of a stranger's cloak, she finally let herself sleep. The scent of smoke and herbs drifted through Clara's nose before her eyes fluttered open. The air was warm, thick with the muffled sounds of people outside. She wasn't dead. Not in the snow, not alone. Her first instinct was to reach for her baby. He was there, swaddled in soft leather and fur. Her newborn son slept against her side. A thick buffalo hide had been tucked around them both, and the pain in her limbs was dulled by warmth. It took a moment before her memory caught up with reality. The man, the Comanche. She sat up, wincing at the ache in her body. The small lodge she was in was circular, with wooden beams above and pelts lining the walls. A pot of something earthy simmered in the center fire. The sound of a door flap rustling drew her attention, and he entered. Tall, with long black hair braided over one shoulder, he wore no shirt, just deerskin leggings and boots laced high. Around his neck hung a red feather tied with leather cord. His face was calm but unreadable. His eyes locked on hers, sharp and still, like the river before it breaks into rapids. He didn't speak. Neither did she. He crouched beside her without a word, and set down a carved bowl with warm broth and roots. Then, gently, he lifted the baby, careful not to wake him, and studied the child's face with something Clara could only describe as sorrow or remembrance. "You brought me here," she finally said, her voice scratchy. "Why?" Still silent, he stood again and walked to the fire. His fingers moved with practiced calm as he stirred the pot. Clara's mind raced. She was in a Comanche camp, a white woman, and a disgraced one at that. In any other tale she'd heard back in Fairwood Hollow, she'd be dead by now. But this man, this stranger, had saved her. Why? After a moment, he spoke low and steady. "You have no one," he said. "And the child?" He did not ask to suffer. The simplicity of the words caught Clara off guard. She nodded slowly. "Thank you for what you did." He didn't nod back. He just said, "Eat." She did. Her body craved it. As she drank the broth, the man stepped toward the lodge flap. Before leaving, he added one more sentence. "My name is Tokai." And then he was gone. Clara stayed in the lodge for 3 days. She was visited only by an old Comanche woman who never spoke but brought herbs and ointment for her soreness. The rest of the camp kept their distance. She could hear them children playing, men speaking in a language she couldn't understand, women grinding corn or hanging hides, but no one entered. No one except Kai. Each day. He brought food and checked on the baby, whom Clara had fully named Daniel James May, after her father and the child's. She offered the name to Tokai once, but he didn't react. Still, she noticed he always touched the child's forehead with his fingers before leaving, almost like a blessing. One night, as the snow outside melted into mud and the sky rumbled with spring, Clara found the courage to speak more. "You don't talk much," she said. Tokai looked at her, then away. "Words are heavy." She smiled faintly. "So are secrets." He hesitated. Then finally said, "My wife was white, taken by soldiers. I failed her." Clara froze. The truth settled like a stone between them. "And now you've helped another white woman," she whispered. "Why?" His eyes met hers then, a flicker of something deep passing through his expression. "Because this time I had a choice." He turned to leave again, but Clara stopped him. "Tokai," she said softly, "you saved me. And him. If I don't belong anywhere anymore, let me help. Let me learn." He didn't reply. But this time, he left the lodge flap open behind him. That night, Clara watched the firelight dance against the curved walls of the lodge, her baby asleep beside her, his tiny hand curled in her dress. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether the tribe would accept her, whether she could survive among them. But she knew this. She wasn't dead in the snow, and a silent warrior with a red feather had offered her more shelter than any preacher or townsman ever. Clara stepped out of the lodge for the first time on the 4th day. The cold had lessened. though patches of snow still clung to shaded places between the cedar trees. The Comanche camp stretched around her like a forgotten world Lodge's made. Of hides and poles, fires smoldering, smoke rising in ribbons into the open sky. Children played near the river's edge, splashing each other with half-melted snow, while women with long, dark braids worked at drying meat, softening hides, and tending fires. And then silence. Every head turned. She knew what they saw. A white woman standing awkwardly just outside Tokai's lodge, holding a swaddled newborn with pale skin and blue eyes. Her dress was torn at the hem. Her hair, once pinned neat in town, now hung loose in rough curls. She looked like what she was an outsider. Clara met their gazes and did not look away. A group of older women began to murmur among themselves. A group of men stared without expression. No one approached, no one smiled. Only one figure moved, a child, maybe 4 years old, with bright eyes and a beaded necklace, who toddled over and looked curiously at the baby in Clara's arms. Clara knelt and smiled. "His name's Daniel," she whispered. The child didn't respond, just reached out and touched the baby's hand with one finger. Then, with a laugh, ran back toward the women. Clara stood, watching the people of the camp move on as though she weren't there. As though she were a shadow not fully seen, not fully wanted. That night, as she fed Daniel by the fire, the lodge flap opened. Tokai entered, silent as ever, placing a small bowl of mashed berries near her feet. Clara glanced up and met his eyes. "They don't want me here," she said. "They fear what they do not understand." "They fear me?" "No, what I might lose again." The words struck harder than she expected. Clara shifted Daniel to her other arm and looked at the man across from her, his broad shoulders marked by old scars, the red feather still hanging near his heart. "You loved her," Clara said softly. Tokai did not respond. He didn't have to. Clara looked down at her son. "The world we came from? It hates people like me. It punishes women who disobey quietly. It crucifies those who do it loudly. I thought I could live with shame, but they didn't let me." Tokai knelt across the fire from her. "My people do not cast out mothers, but they do not welcome ghosts." "Is that what I am to them?" He hesitated. "A spirit from a world that hurt them." The next morning Clara made a choice. If they would not see her, she would show them. She stepped out of the lodge and walked to where the older women were scraping hides. Wordlessly, she picked up a dull-edged bone blade and began mimicking their motion. At first, they ignored her. Then one corrected her grip with a tap. Clara adjusted. When she cut too deep, another hissed in disapproval. She bit her tongue and tried again. By noon, her hands were blistered. But she did not stop. The next day, she asked for water to carry. The third, she cleaned fish by the river. On the fourth, when one of the women handed her a small pouch of ground herbs to ease Daniel's colic, Clara almost cried. They still did not speak to her. But they no longer turned away. A week later, something changed. A young boy, barely more than a toddler, wandered too close to the edge of the woods while playing. Clara, sitting outside her lodge, saw the flash of gray in the trees before anyone else did. A Volfin, desperate, crept toward the boy. Without thinking, Clara screamed and ran. She threw herself between the wolf and the child, arms wide. The beast lunged, catching her sleeve and tearing through her arm with its teeth before the hunters arrived. Arrows flew. The wolf fell. Blood soaked her sleeve. The child cried, but he was unharmed. And for the first time, the Comanche did not look through Clara. They looked at her. They saw a woman who bled not just for her own, but for one of theirs. That night, Tokai sat beside her fire as she held her sleeping son, her arm bandaged with thick poultices. He placed something in her lap, a carved wooden pendant, 2 lines interlocked in a circle. "What is this?" she asked. To mark one who protects. Clara closed her fingers around it. She was no longer just a ghost. She was woman who stepped between. The fire crackled low, sending sparks into the darkening sky. Clara sat outside her lodge, her back resting against a post, her son nestled against her breast. Her arm still throbbed from the wolf's bite, but she kept moving because the baby needed her, and this time no one was coming to save her. Daniel's suckling had slowed. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes tired. Something was wrong. The milk was fading. Her body, strained from blood loss, poor food, and worry, was beginning to fail. Clara had noticed it that morning how Daniel latched on hungrily but quickly began to cry. His tiny fists beat against her chest as if trying to summon what she no longer had. Panic crept up her spine. She tried steeping herbs. She drank water until she was sick. She even crushed berries into a mush and tried spooning it into his mouth, but he gagged. He was too small for anything but her. Tokai noticed the silence first. That evening, as the sky darkened into deep violet, he approached and crouched beside them. Daniel was crying softly, hoarse and weak. Clara's eyes were rimmed red with exhaustion. "I don't have enough," she whispered, her voice cracked. "He's hungry, and I don't know what to do." Tokai placed a hand on the child's forehead. His eyes narrowed not in anger, but thought. He stood and disappeared into the night. Clara blinked, confused. She thought he'd left her to figure it out on her own. She almost resented him for it until he returned 10 minutes later with someone at his side. An older Comanche woman entered the lodge, a short, hunched figure with hair like smoke and eyes that glittered with strange warmth. Sheeta, the medicine woman. Clara tried to sit up, ashamed, but Sheeta waved her back down with a flick of the wrist. Without a word, she knelt beside Clara and gently unwrapped the baby. Her touch was soft, practiced. "She has fed many," Tokai said quietly behind her, "even those who were not hers." "She won't want to help me," Clara whispered, but she was wrong. Sheeta opened a pouch from her belt and placed it in Clara's lap. Inside was a mixture of dried roots, wildflower petals, and what looked like pine bark. The old woman motioned toward the fire and mimed STEEPING. Clara understood. It was a milk booster. "She doesn't care that I'm white?" Clara asked aloud. "She cares that the child is small," Tokai said. "And that you tried." That night became a turning point. Clara drank the bitter tea, forcing it past her gag reflex. 3 times a day, Sheeta brought her more. She taught Clara how to massage her breasts with warm stones, how to rest between feedings even when her mind refused peace. She never spoke, only watched and nodded when Clara did things right. In return, Clara helped with the other infants in the village, offering to swaddle or carry them when the mothers were busy with chores. Slowly, one mother began to speak to her. Then another. One day, one of the women, young, with sharp eyes and a baby of her own, knelt beside Clara while she was washing clothes at the river. "You have pain, but still you feed," she said in halting English. "You are not soft." Clara looked up. "Neither are you?" The woman smiled. It was small, but real. The trial wasn't over. Even as her milk returned in trickles, Daniel remained colicky and restless. Clara refused to let the women take over entirely. She sang to him, even when her voice was hoarse. She walked him in circles, even when her knees threatened to buckle. One night, she rocked him outside beneath the stars, whispering lullabies from her girlhood. Tokai stood nearby, sharpening his blade, listening. "You do not stop," he said. "No," Clara replied, "because he didn't ask to be born into all this. He deserves better." Tokai paused. "So did you." Clara looked up at him, then really looked. A warrior, yes. A protector. But also a man who had lost too much and now stood beside her every night, Even if in silence, she didn't thank him aloud. Instead, she sang louder so that Daniel could sleep, and so that Tokai could remember what peace once sounded like. 2 days later, Daniel latched on and suckled until his cheeks were full and pink. He fell asleep in Clara's arms, milk-drunk and warm. For the first time, she wept not from fear, but relief. Outside, the women passed by and glanced inside. One of them, the youngest, smiled and said, "Mother, not ghost, not out." Spring came slowly to the valley, creeping in with green buds on trees and the smell of damp earth. The snow was gone, but in Clara's chest, a different kind of thaw was happening. She was no longer just surviving. She was learning dot by now, Clara. Could gather herbs without being told which were poisonous. She could shape hides with the other women. She had even learned to whisper short Comanche phrases to Daniel soft, sing-song words taught by Sheeta or the older children. And though the tribe never said it outright, something had changed. They didn't look through her anymore. They saw her, but only one person still kept his walls up. T-O-H single quotes Kai. Every day he came and went. He brought food, tools, firewood. He stood watch over the lodge like it was his instinct. And every night he sat by the fire without speaking, eyes always on the horizon, like he was waiting for something he could never name. Clara couldn't take the silence anymore. "Why won't you talk to me?" she asked one night. Tokai didn't turn his head. He was whittling a small wooden horse for Daniel, the blade moving in slow, steady strokes. "I do talk." "You say what's needed," Clara said, folding a blanket across her lap, "but never what you feel." He paused, just for a second. "Then, what I feel is not useful." Clara stood, moving closer to the fire. Her eyes never left his. "You lost her," she said, "the woman before me. And now you think saving me makes it worse, but it doesn't." His hands tightened around the carving knife. "I did not save her," he said. "I ran," Clara blinked. "What?" Tokai didn't look at her. His voice was steady, but hollow. "Her name was Anna. She came to us with a broken wagon and bruises on her face. I protected her, loved her. My people let her stay because she brought peace to my heart. But she wanted to return to her world. I told her it was too dangerous, but she begged me, and I let her go." Clara's heart dropped. "They took her?" Tokai nodded once. "Soldiers from a nearby fort. They said she was being held against her will. They called her a captive. She screamed when they pulled her from her horse. I heard her all the way down the valley. I didn't follow." "Why not?" Clara asked softly. "Because I was afraid." His voice cracked. He placed the unfinished carving beside the fire and stood. "She died there, or maybe worse. I will never know. I had one chance to choose her. I failed." Clara rose too, standing in front of him. "And now you've chosen again. You carried me from the snow. You protected my son. You stood between me and your own people's judgment." "It is not the same," he said. "It is," Clara said, her voice trembling, "because I know what it's like to be abandoned. To be seen as someone else's mistake. But Daniel and I, we weren't your mistake. We were your chance to forgive yourself." Tokai looked at her, really looked. His dark eyes held a storm in them, years of grief packed into a silence he never allowed to break. Clara reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out something small, a charm. "Silver and worn. My mother gave me this before she died. I kept it hidden through everything. I used to think it was cursed, like I was, but maybe we keep some things not because they're perfect, but because they remind us we're still here." She pressed it into his hand. "You didn't fail me," she whispered. Daniel stirred behind them, cooing, a soft sound, a reminder of life. Tokai turned and walked to the baby, kneeling beside him. With slow, reverent hands, he placed the charm near Daniel's blanket and then laid the carved horse beside it. He didn't say another word, but that night, when the fire burned low and the stars blinked overhead, Clara found him sitting closer than usual, his hand resting near hers, their fingers brushing just barely. And for the first time, he didn't pull away. The past still echoed in his heart, but in the quiet between them, something new was forming, not just survival. Trust. It began with the smell. Clara stood at the edge of the river, washing Daniel's tiny swaddle cloths while he napped on a bed of reeds nearby. The air had the scent of pine and warming soil until suddenly it shifted. Smoke, not from a Comanche fire, a different kind. She turned sharply, heart thudding. Her eyes scanned the valley beyond the trees where a hawk circled low. And just beneath the ridgeline, she saw it, a thin trail of black smoke curling upward, not from within the village, from the far side of the valley, near the old soldier road. She didn't hesitate. She scooped up Daniel and ran. By the time Clara reached the center of the village, Tokai was already on horseback, bow strung across his chest. Warriors gathered near the western ridge, weapons in hand, their faces painted with warning. Sheeta stood near the center fire, murmuring to the elders. Clara approached Tokai breathlessly. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. He stared toward the smoke trail as though seeing ghosts. "White men," he finally said. 5 riders, armed. They stopped near the river fork. "Are they soldiers?" she asked, clutching Daniel tighter. He shook his head. "No, their clothes are not regulation. But they carry rifles. They know how to ride. And they wear pistols. Like men who've used them." Her mouth went dry. She knew that kind. "Bounty hunters," she whispered, "from Fairwood Hollow." Tokai looked at her then. "Your people sent for you?" "No, they wouldn't waste the ink. But I heard talk before they cast me out about men who track women like me for a price. Moral retrieval, they called it." Her jaw tightened. "If they can't shame you, they buy someone else to do it." He nodded once and turned to the other warriors. They dispersed quickly into the trees, silent as ghosts. Tokai looked back at Clara. "Go to Sheeta," he said. "Take Daniel. Don't leave the center fire." She grabbed his hand before he could leave. "Don't kill unless you must." His eyes were unreadable. "If they come for you, they must. Know you are not alone." For 2 tense hours, the camp held its breath. Then came the thudding of hooves. 5 white men rode toward the edge of the clearing. They were dusty, armed, and wore long coats with dried blood on the cuffs. Their leader, a man with a crooked nose and a wide grin that never touched his eyes tipped his hat as they stopped just before the boundary stones. "We're looking for a woman," he called out. "Name of Clara May. Little boy with her. Fair skin, dark hair. Heard she wandered into these parts and got herself adopted." No one answered. He clicked his tongue and looked around. "We don't want trouble. She's wanted by her town for moral violations, theft of church resources, infant abandonment." Clara's fists clenched at her sides. "Lies. She left that baby in the snow, you know. Folks found the tracks. It's a miracle he didn't die." Tokai stepped forward from the trees, bow in hand, calm as dusk. "She did not abandon the child," he said. The bounty hunter blinked. "Well, howdy. You speak English better than most I've met out here." Tokai didn't respond to the insult. She gave birth alone, in snow, with no help. And she still carried the child in her arms. "She's a danger to herself and to the boy." "She is under my cloak," Tokai said. The man laughed. "You claim her?" Tokai's voice dropped. "I do. And the child. You'll not take them." The bounty hunter smirked and raised a hand. The men behind him moved for their rifles. The sound of dozens of arrows being drawn echoed through the trees. From every direction, Comanche warriors stepped forward. Not 5, not 10.30. Every bow pointed at the riders. The leader's grin vanished. "I see," he muttered. "You may leave now." Tokai said. The man looked at his odds, at the quiet fury in Tokai's eyes, at the mother standing near the fire behind him with her baby pressed to her chest. He tipped his hat again, this time lower. No bounty's worth this. And they rode away. That night, the village was silent, but no longer uneasy. Fires burned steadily. Songs rose faintly in the distance. Tokai came to Clara's lodge. She stood outside waiting. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did." "You could have let me go," she said. "Let me be their problem again." "I do not give away what I have claimed," he said. "And you are not a problem. You are a flame that refuses to go out." She stepped forward. "Then I need to ask something." He nodded. Double quotes, "If the world ever tries again to take my son, or shame me into silence, will you still stand beside me?" Tokai looked at her, not as a stranger, not as a burden, but as his equal. Clara woke before dawn to the sound of drums, slow, steady, and deep, like a heartbeat echoing through the valley. The fire in her lodge had gone cold, but Daniel slept peacefully, tucked against her side. She stepped out, the ground cool beneath her feet, and saw the entire camp gathered near the eastern ridge. The sky was still dark, a pale gray light beginning to stretch across the horizon. The air held the scent of smoke and sage. Tokai stood at the center of the circle, painted in traditional war markings, 2 black lines across his face, red ochre streaked down his chest. He held a spear in one hand, a ceremonial sash tied around his arm. The red feather that never left his neck now rested at the tip of his weapon. Beside him stood the elders. And in front of him, her. Clara froze. Tokai met her gaze and gave the slightest nod. One of the women, Sheeta, approached Clara and placed a soft, beaded shawl over her shoulders. "You walk as yourself today," she said. "Not as a stranger, not as ghost. As a woman of choice." Clara didn't fully understand the words, but she understood the moment. She stepped forward slowly, barefoot, her heart pounding. She could feel the stares, some warm, some still unsure, but no longer hostile. Daniel stirred in her arms. Cooing sleepily, Tokai turned to face her completely. He held out the feather. "In my people's way," he said, "a warrior may make one vow that binds him more than war or blood. Not to a woman for ownership, not to a child for duty, but to a life." Clara's lips parted. "I have chosen you," he continued, voice firm but not loud. "Not because you need saving, but because you stayed when you had every reason to run." He reached into his pouch and pulled out a second feather, white, with a single black tip. "This is yours," he said, "given to those who pass the trial of flame, milk, and sorrow. You bled for this tribe, sang for your son, and faced men with guns without trembling." He stepped forward and gently tucked the feather into Clara's hair. The moment it rested above her brow, the women of the camp let out a soft cry, high and melodic, like the howl of wind through canyons. Clara felt the tears rising but forced herself to speak. "I never wanted to be owned," she said. "Not by law, not by shame. But I'll walk beside any man who sees me as more than my scars." She looked down at Daniel, then back at Tokai. "If you vow to stand with us, not above us, then I vow the same." Tokai nodded and placed the red feather at the edge of the fire. It burned quickly, smoke rising straight into the sky. The tribe let out another cry, this one sharper, stronger. The ceremony was complete. Later that evening, Clara sat beneath the stars with Tokai at her side, Daniel asleep in a cradle of woven reeds. The night was still and warm. Crickets chirped in the tall grass. Somewhere in the distance, someone was playing a flute. Tokai handed her a carved pendant, his own. It had the symbol of two interlocking paths. "I made it the night I buried her," he said quietly, speaking of his first love. "I never gave it to anyone else. I thought I never would." Clara took it in her palm. "Then I'll keep it," she said. "But not because I belong to you. Because you chose to belong to me." A long silence passed. Then he said, "I used to fear waking up and finding everyone gone again. I used to fear waking up and remembering I was still alive," Clara whispered. "But not anymore." He glanced at her. "Why?" "Because now," she said, "I'm not just surviving. I'm standing." He reached for her hand and laced his fingers with hers. They sat in silence until the stars faded, and dawn crept over the land again. This time, Clara didn't feel like a ghost. She felt like a wife by choice, a mother by fire, and a woman by her own name. The peace that followed Clara and Tokai's union was quiet but real. For the first time in her life, Clara was not simply tolerated, she was part of something. She wove baskets with the women, told stories to the children, and learned the names of herbs and stars in a language once foreign to her. Daniel was growing strong, round-cheeked, and curious, always clinging to the hem of her skirt or crawling into Tokai's lap with a squeal of joy. And yet, with the changing winds of early winter, came a scent Clara had learned to dread. Smoke. This was not cook-fire smoke. It was heavier, bitter with the scent of scorched cloth and gunpowder. And it wasn't from within the village. It was from beyond the southern ridge. That evening, the scouts returned with grim faces. A nearby camp, Tokai told Clara, burned. Horses taken. Children missing. By who? Men, white. Not soldiers. Not bounty men. Raiders, Clara stiffened. Like the ones who came for me? No, he said darkly. Worse. The Comanche warriors began to prepare not for retaliation, but for defense. Spears were sharpened, arrows fletched, children sent to the high caves with food bundles. The women painted lines of red and ash on the lodge entrances, protection marks. The elders prayed by the fire for strength, but everyone knew it was more than prayer they would need. Tokai was quiet, more withdrawn than usual. Clara saw the shadows around his eyes deepen. She didn't press him until she saw him sharpening. His longest blade after sunset, his red feather braided with a strip of leather across his chest. "You think they'll come here," she said. He nodded. "Not for you, not for me, just because we exist." "And what will you do?" "I will stop them," he said. "Before they come near Daniel." Clara stepped closer, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Don't ride alone." "I ride fastest." "Alone. That doesn't make you strongest." He looked at her, the fire reflecting in his eyes. "I rode alone before and lost everything. I will not lose you." She reached down, picked up his red feather from where it had fallen, and tied it into his braid herself. "Then bring yourself back to us," she whispered. "All of you, or not at all." At dawn, the alarm came from the North Guard post. 5 riders, no, 6, heavily armed, dragging something behind them. A CRDLEBOARD. Empty. The village roared to life. Kai and 5 other warriors mounted swiftly. Clara tried not to cry as she handed Daniel to Sheeta. "Keep him safe," she said. Tokai turned to her. "No matter what happens, he has you." Clara stepped forward and kissed his forehead, not as a goodbye, but as a promise. Then he was gone, galloping hard into the pale morning light. The hours passed like stone. Smoke curled once again on the horizon, but this time from the other side, from where the raiders had come. And then HOOFBATS. Clara stood on the ridge, shielding her eyes from the wind. It was Tokai. His horse was lathered with sweat, sides heaving. Tokai was bloodied, his left arm cut deep, his lip split, but his eyes were clear. And against his chest, wrapped in a singed wool cloth, was a baby. Alive. The village erupted in shouts and prayers as he dismounted. The child was returned to her mother, who wept into Tokai's hands. He turned, limping toward Clara. She ran to him, wrapped her arms around his waist. "I told you," she whispered, choking back tears. "Bring yourself back, all of you." Nodded into her hair. "They will not come again." That night, a feast was held not for victory, but for survival. The drums beat low and slow. The warriors told their tale. Tokai had tracked the raiders to an old trapping cabin. A fight broke out. 2 raiders dead. The others fled without the child. When asked what he did after, Tokai simply said, "I took her home." No boasts, no glory. Just what needed doing. Clara sat beside him, Daniel asleep in her lap. The people around her were no longer strangers or rescuers. They were hers, and when she looked at the scar on Tokai's arm, she saw not a wound, but a vow fulfilled. Winter deepened. The first snow blanketed the hills, turning the Comanche camp into a quiet world of white and whispers. Smoke curled from lodges, and the sound of children's laughter echoed as they tumbled in the drifts. Daniel had begun walking unsteadily, but proudly, and his giggles lit the lodge brighter than any fire. But even with peace returned and the raiders gone, something stirred beneath the surface. A question left unspoken too long. It came when one of the elders, a stooped man named Wakot, visited Clara's lodge and sat silently by the fire. "You live here," he finally said, eyes reflecting the flames. "You work, you bleed, you love, but you carry no name." Clara blinked. "Clara is my name." Wakot shook his head gently. "It is the name of your old life, given by people who cast you aside." "I gave it to myself," she said, defensive. "No man gave it to me, not even Daniel's father." Wakot nodded slowly, understanding. Still. It was chosen in pain. "Would you like to choose again, this time from strength?" Clara was quiet. Then, "What would I choose?" Wakot stood. "That is for the council to help decide. Tomorrow you speak, and we listen." Tokai was already aware. "It is tradition," he told her as they walked among the snow-heavy trees. "When someone becomes more than what they were, they may ask for a new name or accept the one the tribe sees in them." Clara shook her head. "And they'll just ... What? Vote on it?" He laughed, a rare and low sound. "Not vote, witness. It's not a judgment. It's an honoring." Clara stopped beside a frozen creek. "But what? If they see me as nothing more than an outsider still?" Tokai stepped close, brushing snow from her hair. "Then I will stand and say what I have seen." "What have you seen?" He looked into her eyes. A woman who walked into the fire and walked out holding life. The next day, the Lodge of Council was full. Elders, mothers, children, warriors. Even Daniel, toddling proudly to sit in Sheeta's lap with a bit of deer jerky in his mouth. Clara sat in the center. Her palms were damp, but her voice didn't shake. "I was born, Clara," she began. "I was cast out because I loved wrongly. Because I bled in childbirth without a ring on my finger. Because I carried a child who reminded others of their shame." Heads nodded. A few murmurs of sympathy stirred the air. "But here I found something I never had. Not just safety, not just shelter. Worth. I dug roots, not because I was invited, but because I stayed." She swallowed hard. "I want a name not to forget who I was, but to honor what I've become." The lodge was silent for a moment. Then Wakot rose. "I watched you nurse your child with no fire and no food during the frost moon. You did not beg. You did not flee. You simply endured. That is not weakness. that is enduring flame. A second. Woman stood. I saw her carry water with a wound in her side and a baby on her hip. She sings to him at night. That is not a ghost. That is mother strength. Then Tokai stood. I rode back from war not for glory, but because she waited. I have seen no warrior fiercer in silence than her. If I could give her a name, it would be She Who Stayed. Wacote turned to Clara. Do you accept what they see? Clara was trembling, tears on her cheeks. I do, he smiled. Then rise, Tayeta knew. That is your name now. The one who remained standing. The crowd let out a low, rising sound approval. Daniel clapped, oblivious but joyful. Clara looked down at her hands, once blistered from shame, now warmed by honor. She wasn't just here, she belonged. That night, a new necklace was placed around her neck, 3 stones carved with symbols: fire, child, and earth. Tokai kissed her cheek as the final stone was tied. To us, he whispered. To all of us, she said. And when the wind howled through the valley that night, it no longer sounded like loneliness. It sounded like home. The snow had begun to melt. Winter's grip weakened, and with it came signs of spring buds on the cottonwoods. Bird song in the mornings, and Daniel chasing butterflies instead of sitting beside the fire. The earth seemed to stretch after a long sleep, and so did Clara. Or rather, Tayeta knew, the one who remained standing. She wore her name proudly now. The children used it when they called for her. The women used it when asking for her help with herbs or water. Even the elders spoke it with respect. But one morning, as she stepped out of the lodge to fetch water, something froze her midstep. A rider, a white man, alone, flag of truce raised. And beside him on the saddle was something Clara hadn't seen in a long time, a U.S. male SECERT. The Comanche scouts had already intercepted him, but he wasn't armed. Just weary and wine-burnt. I'm looking for a woman named Clara Boone. The rider said. A hush fell. Clara stepped forward slowly. I was her, he blinked. You look like her. I've changed. The rider reached into his satchel and pulled out a thick envelope sealed in wax. This came for you 2 winters ago, from New York. It was returned, redirected, and well, here I am. Clara took it without a word. Tokai appeared silently beside her, watchful. The rider nodded. That's all, no tricks, just a letter. He rode off without asking for food or thanks. Clara stood in the doorway, staring at the seal. Her hands trembled. It's from my sister, she whispered. Inside the lodge. Clara lit a small fire and opened the envelope. The first line nearly made her breath stop. Clara, if you're reading this, then you survived. Tears stung her eyes as she continued. I don't know where you are. I don't know what became of you after Father's men cast you out. I wept for you the day they turned you away. I was too young to stop them, too afraid. But I want you to know something. I never stopped looking. Mother died with your name on her lips. She begged me to find you, or at least send word. I've written this letter every year, hoping one day it reaches you. If you have a child, tell them there. Aunt loved them before they were born, and if you are alone, come home or write back, or send a sign. If you've found peace, that's all I need to know. With all my heart, Anna. Clara Tayeta sat still for a long time. Tokai crouched beside her. You're not alone, he said softly. I know, she whispered, but the letter stirred something, not regret, not longing. Just a quiet reckoning. A closing of a door she hadn't realized was still open. That night, Clara went outside and tied the letter to a piece of driftwood, setting it afloat in the creek that fed the valley. She didn't want to send it back. She wanted to let it go, later. That evening, she sat with Tokai and Daniel beneath the stars. I had a sister, she said, who remembered me even after I was erased. Tokai held her hand. Then she will carry a lighter heart knowing you lived. I want to send her something." "What?" Clara looked up at the moon. "Not words. A name. My name now. So she know I didn't disappear, I became." "Ah." Few days later, she handed a wrapped bundle to the same postal rider who had camped nearby. Inside, a drawing of the valley, done in charcoal, a woven bracelet from Daniel's fingers, and a single note. "Anna, my name is Tayedanu now. I stayed. I survived. I found love, and he rides like the wind, and our son laughs like thunder. Tell no one where I am. I am not lost. I am finally home. Your sister." And so the story of the cast-out woman who gave birth in the wild and was wrapped in a Comanche warrior's cloak came to rest, not as a tragedy, not as a tale of shame, but as the story of a woman who chose her own name, her own people, and her own kind of